because it's the same reason why he liked me, was the fact that I didn't care who he was. That was the thing. I talked to him like he was a normal human being. And that's what, and kids do that to him because he's not.
Two of the most famous people on Earth, completely isolated, locked in a friendship nobody else understood. With everyone obsessing over that new Netflix doc, Macaulay Culkin's name is right back in the storm. The eccentric king of pop and an 11-year-old kid. The world looked at Neverland and saw something deeply disturbing. But what actually happened when the heavy gates closed and the cameras stopped rolling? The truth, maybe, is wilder than the headlines. Was Culkin really the only one? Culkin exposed! Fast forward to 2005, and the tension that had been bubbling under the surface for over a decade finally explodes into a full-on legal war. Michael Jackson is formally arrested and put on trial in Santa Maria, California, accused of molesting a 13-year-old boy. This wasn't just another tabloid headline. This was a massive, high-stakes criminal trial where Michael was facing up to 20 years in state prison. For 14 straight weeks, the courthouse became the absolute center of the media universe. It was a complete and utter circus outside. Fans were weeping on the sidewalks. News anchors from every major network were screaming into cameras, and a literal parade of disgruntled former Neverland employees took the stand, painting Michael as a master manipulator who was using his wealth to groom vulnerable kids. The prosecution's strategy was aggressive. To prove a pattern of behavior, they called an ex-chef and an ex-maid to the stand who testified under oath that they had personally seen Michael acting inappropriately with Macaulay Culkin back in the early 90s. One employee even claimed he saw Michael with his hand inside the young actor's shorts. The media ate it up, and the public assumed this was the smoking gun. It seemed like the entire world was actively waiting for Mac to finally break his silence and bring down the king of pop. Then came day 49 of the trial. Macaulay Culkin, now a 24-year-old adult, walked through a private back entrance of the courthouse to take the witness stand. The room went completely silent. You have to understand the immense pressure on this guy. His agents, his lawyers, and his producers had all spent weeks begging him not to show up, telling him he had absolutely nothing to gain and everything to lose by associating with Michael at his lowest point. But Mac didn't care. He sat in that chair, looked the jury in the eye, and completely flipped the script. When Jackson's defense attorney asked him point blank about the allegations of abuse, Mac didn't hesitate. He called the prosecution's entire narrative absolutely ridiculous. He looked at the jury and admitted that yes, he had slept in Michael's bedroom a dozen or more times as a kid, but he explained that Michael's room was a massive, multi-level suite with 3 bathrooms, and sharing a bed was just a normal, innocent sleepover thing between friends who were staying up late playing video games. He firmly stated that Michael had never touched him inappropriately, he had never seen Michael act weird with anyone else, and he was genuinely shocked to hear his own name being thrown around on CNN without anyone bothering to ask him first. The prosecution tried to rattle him on cross-examination, digging into his recent personal struggles, but Mac held his ground with total confidence. His raw, unapologetic honesty completely cratered the state's case. By standing up there as an adult and denying he was a victim, he shattered the prosecution's momentum. A few weeks later, the jury delivered a sweeping verdict, not guilty on all 14 counts. Michael walked out of that courtroom a free man, but the legal victory couldn't erase the damage that had already been done. Because in the court of public opinion, an acquittal doesn't always mean an exoneration. Two lonely universes collision. It's 1991, the internet isn't a thing yet, cable TV is king, and the two most famous human beings on the entire planet are an eccentric pop king in his 30s and an 11-year-old kid who just made a movie about slapping aftershave on his face. On paper, it sounds completely bizarre, like some weird late-night pop culture fever dream cooked up by a Hollywood publicist. But if you actually step back and look at the sheer madness of their daily lives, it makes total sense why they gravitated toward each other. They were basically the only two people alive who knew what it felt like to be inside that specific fishbowl. Macaulay Culkin didn't just become a successful child actor, he became a global phenomenon practically overnight. Home Alone grossed nearly $500 million, and suddenly, Mac couldn't walk down a public street without being totally mobbed by grown adults. He couldn't go to a normal school anymore, he couldn't play at a regular park, and behind the scenes, his own parents were turning his life into a high-stakes, toxic corporate business. He was completely, utterly isolated from kids his own age. Everyone wanted a piece of him, everyone wanted his money, and he was surrounded by suits. Honestly, who else on earth could possibly relate to having your childhood snatched away by a hyper-intense global spotlight? Enter Michael Jackson. Michael had been trapped in that exact same psychological pressure cooker since he was a literal kid fronting the Jackson 5 under a notoriously strict, overbearing father. He knew exactly how lonely that felt. He knew what it was like to have the entire world look at you like an object or a paycheck rather than a living, breathing human being. So, seeing this little kid from New York drowning in sudden, terrifying fame, Michael reached out to Mac. He didn't want a piece of his stardom, and he wasn't trying to manage his career. He just wanted to give the kid a place to blow off steam, run around, and just breathe for a second. That place, of course, was Neverland Ranch. For Mac, it wasn't some creepy, mysterious fortress with hidden agendas. It was basically the ultimate, unfiltered childhood playground. We're talking a private zoo packed with exotic animals, a massive movie theater with its own fully stocked candy counter, actual amusement park rides spinning in the backyard, and 0 adults telling them to sit still or grow up. To an 11-year-old kid who was constantly being hounded by paparazzi and stressed out by greedy Hollywood executives, Neverland was a literal sanctuary. It was a kingdom built specifically to escape reality. They would just hang out, watch hours of cartoons, play arcade games, and eat junk food like normal kids, completely unbothered by the outside world. Mac even ended up filming the intro for Michael's massive black or white music video, playing a rebellious kid blasting rock music in his bedroom. To Mac, Michael wasn't some untouchable musical deity. He was just a big kid who happened to have a lot of money and never grew up. For a brief window in time, it really seemed like they had found a weird, perfect escape from the rest of humanity. But, as we all know, the rest of the world was watching through the gates, and they were getting deeply, deeply uncomfortable with what they thought they saw. So when did this innocent playground vibe start looking like something way more sinister to the public? The smoke and the fire. The year is 1993, and the fantasy of Neverland crashes hard into reality. Suddenly, the headlines aren't about moonwalks or amusement parks anymore. A man named Evan Chandler comes forward, accusing Michael Jackson of inappropriately touching his 13-year-old son, Jordan. Just like that, the cultural narrative flips overnight. The whimsical wonderland the media used to gush about is suddenly framed as a creepy, calculated trap designed to lure in unsuspecting kids. The police literally raid Neverland while Michael is away on tour, tearing the place apart looking for evidence. For the public, this was a massive, collective I knew it moment. People looked at Michael's eccentric behavior, his obsession with Peter Pan, and his habit of hosting sleepovers with young boys, and they drew a straight line to guilt. The media went into absolute overdrive, covering every single rumor, leak, and tabloid theory 24 hours a day. It was the birth of the modern, non-stop celebrity scandal cycle. Michael eventually settled that civil lawsuit out of court for a staggering $23 million, which, to most onlookers, felt like a silent confession. But while the entire world was picking sides and losing its mind, where was Macaulay Culkin? Surprisingly, he was totally out of the loop. Right as the 1993 firestorm was exploding around Michael, Mac was dealing with his own personal nightmare. His parents were going through a bitter, incredibly nasty public divorce, fighting over who got to control Mac's multi-million-dollar fortune. It got so bad that Mac ended up taking his own parents to court to legally block them from his money, effectively retiring from acting at just 14 years old. He went from being the biggest star in the world to a teenager hiding out in a New York apartment, desperately trying to figure out how to just be normal. Because he completely stepped away from Hollywood, Mac wasn't caught up in the immediate fallout of the 1993 allegations. He and Michael drifted apart a bit during those chaotic teenage years, mostly because Mac was busy trying to build a regular life away from cameras, managers, and greedy adults. But they never completely lost touch. Michael would still check in on him, acting like a weirdly supportive uncle who knew exactly what it felt like to have your family exploit you for money. Even with the dark cloud hanging over Michael's head, Mac never changed his view of his friend. To the rest of the world, Michael Jackson was becoming a radioactive figure, a punchline on late-night TV, and a subject of intense criminal suspicion. The innocence was entirely gone, replaced by a permanent skepticism that followed him everywhere he went. Every friendship he had with a minor was now being re-examined through a hypercritical lens, and the media was just waiting for the next shoe to drop. The pressure was building, the scrutiny was suffocating, and the stage was being set for a final, catastrophic collision. What happens when the rumors stop being tabloid gossip and actually turn into a fight for your literal freedom? The Others, Echoes and Accusations. When you look at the whole picture, Macaulay Culkin's unwavering defense of Michael Jackson stands out because it contrasts sharply with the other voices that have emerged over the decades. The 2005 trial and the conversations reignited by the Verdict docuseries on Netflix show that Neverland was a sprawling place with a rotating door of child visitors, and not everyone walked out with the same story. On one side, you have the guys who completely blew the door off Jackson's legacy years later, specifically Wade Robson and James Safechuck. If you watch the previous documentaries, you know their stories are harrowing. They were both young boys who, just like Mac, were deeply embedded in Michael's inner circle, danced with him, and stayed at the ranch. For years, they actually denied any abuse happened. Robson even testified for Jackson in 2005. But years after his death, they came forward alleging severe, prolonged trauma, claiming they had been deeply manipulated as kids. Then you have a middle ground of former child stars like Corey Feldman. Corey has been incredibly vocal about his own trauma in Hollywood, but when it comes to Jackson, his take is incredibly nuanced. He's always said that while Michael's behavior was definitely unconventional and boundary crossing for an adult, Michael never did anything inappropriate to him personally. Feldman's take has always been that Michael was just a deeply broken person who related better to kids than adults. And then you have guys like Brett Barnes, another childhood friend of Jackson's who has fiercely maintained his innocence alongside Mac, screaming from the rooftops that the media entirely weaponized their innocent childhood sleepovers for ratings. That's what makes this whole web so incredibly messy. You have this massive conflicting chorus of former child stars, all of whom shared the exact same bedrooms, the exact same amusement park rides, and the exact same bizarre reality. Yet, they walked away with completely irreconcilable versions of who Michael Jackson actually was. The Verdict docu proved that Michael Jackson's legacy is permanently fractured. It didn't change minds, it just solidified the gridlock. He is forever locked in history as two completely different people, a misunderstood, lonely child genius to some, and a calculating predator to others. Mac has never tried to rewrite his history or appease the shifting winds of public opinion. He's never walked back his defense of Michael Jackson, and he remains deeply involved as the godfather to Prince, Paris, and Biggie. He survived an abusive father, a toxic custody battle over his fortune, and the heaviest media scrutiny imaginable, only to emerge on the other side as a completely grounded, normal guy. He didn't let the chaotic shadow of Neverland consume him. Instead, he built his own sanctuary, one made of family, privacy, and a quiet peace he earned the hard way. Macaulay Culkin's big revelation was his raw, unshakable truth. He survived the wildest childhood in pop culture history, fiercely defended his friend, and walked away with his sanity intact. Turns out, the boy left home alone, finally found peace. Hit subscribe for more deep dives.